My editor, Zinjo, who's from New Zealand, is currently here in America. And I need to know why I can make fun of his country, okay? So why everyone is leaving New Zealand, let's find out.
One of the most beautiful...
By the way, I've been to New Zealand. I did a trip with Aiden for, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks. And it was beautiful and lovely and a great place. And I thought, wow, it's a really cool place to live. And I'm kind of jealous of New Zealanders. It's like such a gorgeous country. But now I'll learn why it actually sucks.
Countries in the world. In addition to its picturesque landscapes, a lot of that beauty also comes down to the fact that...
Stay with a yard fan? We sort of did. I mean, he was also a Atrioc. He was a Marketing Monday guy. He told me specifically he didn't like the Hitman stuff. At the time, that was like the two things I had. And he was like, I don't like the Hitman. He met him at a grocery store one time. And then we went to go stay with him in New Zealand. He was just a kid, dude. He was like 20. And Aiden just meets him at a grocery store because he was visiting LA, gets his number, and we just fly across the world to go stay with him. It's high trust, crazy. But the guy was super chill. What's funny though, he's one of those guys that told me, he's like, hey, I've been reading some of the books that you recommended, and I switched my major to marketing, and I'm about to graduate, and I got a job in marketing. I was like, dude, that's badass. Good for you. Good luck. But, you know, just be careful because a lot of people end up not liking it or whatever. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm all in. And now he's like, I think is a UFC fighter. He did not like it. He switched out. I don't know his exact thing he's doing, but it's like, it's way different. He switched completely out. So it was just a funny follow-up. But he was a really good guy.
Is extremely remote. So much so that it's left off a lot of global maps, and it's home to a relatively small population of just 5.3 million people. These people enjoy a very high standard of living, good education, very stable government, good access to healthcare, and a relatively egalitarian culture.
Seems great.
Now, while all of this may sound great on a tourism brochure, it has had some unintuitive consequences on the national economy, an economy which was very unique to begin with. What is happening is that Kiwis are seeing a country that probably looks like a dreamland to most of the rest of the world, and they're leaving it.
Why?
From an already small population, New Zealand has one of the highest rates of emigration anywhere in the world, with a bulk of them just making the short jump across here to Australia. More than 10% of New Zealand's people currently live...
I mean, to be clear, my editor, who is from New Zealand, lives in Australia now. 3 years ago, he moved to Australia. So he's actually the perfect... But I guess I don't know why, because it's so beautiful there. I mean, it really felt like a really wonderful, nice place to live. I mean, I'm sure it's just cost of living, right? But Australia can't be that much cheaper.
In Australia. This isn't a small issue either. There are in some cases just as many people leaving per capita from New Zealand as there are from third world countries embroiled in active conflicts. And of course the question is, why? To make matters worse, the bulk of this exodus is made up of highly productive workers.
New Zealand is broken and you're dumb to stay. That's a harsh headline.
Right at the start of their careers. Now, the population is still growing, but that has been fueled largely by immigration to fill in the gaps left by the skilled workers who are leaving, and that itself is creating...
Yo, we were there. We were at this exact beach. We were there. I was just going to say, because Aiden walked into these, it's like a Louis Vuitton, Gucci, it's like fancy stuff, and Aiden walked in there and fucking shopped for way too long, wasting my fucking time. We were at this exact spot. This is like, I don't know. It's in the North Island where the ferry is. This was Aiden's slop store, yeah.
Largely by immigration to fill in the gaps left by the skilled workers who are leaving, and that itself is creating other problems, only making this whole issue harder to address. I don't know which one. And then, on top of that,
yeah, New Zealand it was after we took the ferry. I don't know if it was the day before the day after.
The exact opposite problem coming the other way. A certain group of Australians are flooding into New Zealand and doing what Australians do best. So, what makes New Zealand's economy so unique? What are the issues causing so many Kiwis to leave New Zealand? And finally, why has this trend been so hard to reverse?
Okay.
We've all been there. You leave the house or the country and realise you forgot a file, or worse, an entire project folder sitting on your desktop at home. That's exactly why we use AI. The link is in the description. New Zealand's economy is largely... That
ad was to tell you to buy any desk. It was just a little ad reading included that said like, hey, you got to have a place to put your stuff, so buy any desk you can. And I think that's cool. I think that's cool. Just anything that works.
Defined by the realities that it is quite small and extremely remote. It has roughly the same total population as the city of Sydney just across the pond here in Australia. Wow. And even here in Australia itself, we're not exactly known for our massive population. But this is both a blessing and a curse. A curse in the sense that building globally competitive industries there is extremely difficult because almost anything that can be done in New Zealand can be done much cheaper at a much larger scale and much closer to shipping lanes up in Asia. This isn't just traditional heavy industries either. Financial services are usually a key export of comparatively advanced regional nations like this, but why would anyone go do their international banking in Auckland when there is Singapore, which is far closer physically to most commercial centres, but also far more integrated into the global financial system for most business requirements? Even if someone wanted financial services specifically for operations in this region, Sydney is right there with a more widely recognised currency and a bigger overall market.
Dude, why don't they make it into an ultimate hub for nomad employees? You know, laptop jobs. It's just such a beautiful place to live. Why don't they just make it like, because our cost of living is ass? Yikes.
What's more is that the political connections between Australia and New Zealand are so close that practically anything an international business would...
Wait, why don't they make the whole economy around cleaning Gabe Newell's billionaire doomsday bunker? Why don't they just expand the bunker so that like 1/3 of New Zealand can get a job maintaining and cleaning it? That would fix the economy.
Want to do in New Zealand can be done from a base of operations in Australia. This closeness is an extremely big deal, so do keep that in mind. The point is, though, the only industries operating in New Zealand are industries that need to be there. Tourism, local finance, local services, some regional maritime operations, they all play a role, and it must be remembered that the population is tiny, so there isn't a need for a huge number of huge services. But a closer look at the exact breakdown of these industries will shed some light on these problems. One standout area is agriculture. New Zealand is one of the most agriculturally productive countries in the world, which is highly unusual for such an advanced economy. The channel the Beaver Dude, did a great deep dive on this, so I don't want to repeat too much here. But the point is that New Zealand has taken farming, which is typically an industry relied on by lower income countries, and used its incredibly fertile land, abundant water sources, and modern technologies to produce valuable export commodities that are very competitive in the global economy, especially next door in Asia, which has a lot of mouths to feed.
Hell yeah.
Now this is great and all, but most well-educated, city-dwelling New Zealanders aren't exactly lining up to go and work on farms. There aren't that many jobs there anyway. Farms in New Zealand are some of the most valuable in the world per hectare because they are extremely fertile and because they're in the southern hemisphere, which means they can grow off-season foods for the much larger markets in the northern hemisphere. But when people are spending this much on their farmland, it only makes sense to also invest into the best equipment as well, which means most of these operations are highly mechanized and require relatively little human labour.
He's like the final boss. This is when the boss music plays and the fucking HP bar goes across the top of the screen. He's unlocking for...
So, then, what's left? Well, the biggest industries in the country by far are all centred around housing.
So beautiful!
Selling houses, renting houses, building houses, financing houses, and governing the selling, renting, building and financing of all those houses
so
all collectively make up about
bubble.
half of the country's entire economic output. Now, this has caused two big problems. For starters, there is obviously just the cost of these houses.
Yeah, I'm sure the cost has now ballooned way above what anyone making the wages that this economy can support can afford. I assume everyone's taking out ever-increasing massive loans to afford ever-increasing housing prices. Everything's back to housing and debt. Shit's crazy. No wonder Gen Z's revolting in every fucking country.
When this much of the economy is dependent on playing pass the parcel of land, it's perhaps unsurprising that this sparsely populated and very remote country has some of the most unaffordable real estate in the world. Now, to be fair, the country has taken some steps to deflate this housing market, like banning foreign buyers from purchasing property. The idea was sound. By cutting off a source of demand for property, all other things being equal, prices should have fallen. But in reality, it didn't really do too much. Before the ban, foreign buyers were only 3% of purchases anyway, and on top of that, it didn't stop the biggest source of foreign demand, which was...
Wait, so you're saying there was a problem economically with a country? And because politicians know that fixing the problem would be too painful, they blamed it on foreigners, even though percentage-wise they weren't that big of an impact. And then nothing changed? That's why the people in New Zealand are fucking weird and different. They don't do it like the rest of the world.
Was Australians. Because Australia and New Zealand really are so close, we have a lot of agreements where we will, for the most part, treat their people like our people and vice versa. That means that the ban specifically did not include Australians, who were the largest foreign buyers in the first place. People in Australia, on average, have a lot of money, and something like a holiday house or even a retirement home in places like Queenstown or Auckland are extremely popular with wealthy Australians who want to live amongst beautiful sceneries without those sceneries actively trying to kill them. Investing in New Zealand is particularly attractive as well, because even though their house prices are extremely high, they are still for the most part lower than major cities in Australia. Oh, and on top of that, it can be very tax efficient. Homebuyers need to pay something called stamp duty when investing in a property here in Australia. This is a fee of roughly 3% of the home price paid upfront, which doesn't sound too bad, but when a shack like this sells for $7 million, it does add up.
Christ.
New Zealand doesn't have this upfront fee, making it an attractive alternative. Of course, most demand comes from within the country, and for what it's worth, prices have been falling over recent years thanks to government policies that have largely made properties less tax-efficient investing vehicles.
Okay, that's
the changes
good.
themselves, just like the foreign investor ban, haven't actually been that huge, but even the indication that the government wanted to do something about house prices was enough to take a lot of the exuberance out of the market. Either way, prices are still a problem, more so here than most other countries around the world, and this makes it seem like a pretty open and shut case, right? Young Kiwis who can't afford to start a life in New Zealand are moving out to somewhere where they can.
Is it not
The
that?
problem with that assumption is that more than half of them are moving out of the frying pan and into the fire that is Australia. If they really did just want cheaper homes, this would not be the move. What they're really after is opportunity. The only industries in New Zealand are those that really have to be there, which means unless people want to work in agriculture or in jobs somehow connected to the local real estate market, there is just more opportunities in larger Australian cities.
That makes sense.
Now, this by itself isn't that unusual. More specialised professions naturally tend to gravitate towards larger commercial centres. If someone wanted to work as a fine arts curator or a high-end researcher or even just a senior manager, most of those jobs can't really be found in small country towns. There just isn't enough demand to support those roles in smaller commercial centres, so naturally they tend to shift towards big cities. The thing that makes New Zealand so unique though is that the big cities all of these jobs are gravitating towards are in a different country. Brain drain like this is also not unique, but it doesn't usually impact high-income countries quite this much, and again, the reason this is happening to New Zealand is its closeness with Australia. For simplicity, the legal and political
Yeah, I mean, this has happened to Canada in a bit with America. A lot of top Canadians have immigrated out, even though they don't really want to, just because a lot of jobs opportunities are more in the U.S. Probably happening with some Eastern European countries and France, Germany.
Connections between these two countries
And the
are kind
EU.
of like those within the EU. People from either side of the Tasman are
England,
free
all of England to London, but that's the same country. But yes,
to live, work and buy housing in either respective country with very few restrictions, which for New Zealanders means that there isn't much stopping their people from leaving. It's also worth mentioning that opportunities for education are generally more plentiful in the larger cities of Australia as well. We have a larger number of larger universities, and we treat students from New Zealand the same as local students when it comes to tuition costs and even government-operated student loans for certain Kiwis who meet residency requirements. As something of an anecdotal example, when my partner went to medical school, about half of the students in their year were from New Zealand because there were just more places available for this kind of study in Australia. On top of this, the jump between NZ and Oz is arguably easier than people moving within the EU because both populations down here speak English as their first language, and culturally we are extremely close. It's not something that economists or demographers like to address too openly, but the reality is that a New Zealander living in Australia is not going to attract the same animosity when compared to migrants coming from other countries.
right.
So yeah, the reason that so many New Zealanders are leaving New Zealand is because it's really easy, and to most young professionals, Australian cities are just slightly more attractive. Unfortunately though, as simple as this dynamic is, reversing its effects is going to be extremely difficult. Currently there are almost 600,000 New Zealand-born people living in Australia, more than 10% of the total number of people living in New Zealand. There are also about 90,000 Australians who have gone the other way, but again, they tend to be older, independently wealthy
Yeah, like
retirees
wealthy.
who aren't going to contribute much to the labour market. To make up for losing all of those young workers, New Zealand has had to fill in the gaps primarily with immigration to support its ageing population. Now, the arguments for and against skilled migration are plentiful and long and frankly a bit tedious. Most people have made up their mind on the issue, and obviously economics is just one part of the discussion.
Sure.
But in the case of New Zealand, it's again a little bit different because yes, they have brought in new arrivals mostly from the large population centres in Asia to fill in for the people leaving, but the thing is, a lot of the people who have migrated there are leaving as well. And where do they go? Well, largely to Australia. This has given New Zealand a bit of a reputation as a backdoor into major cities like Sydney and Melbourne. In general, it's easy to apply for working visas, permanent residency, and eventually citizenship in New Zealand because they do need to maintain their leaking workforce. But once someone has that, they can just move to Australia as well. A first-generation New Zealand citizen is also going to be less attached to a country that they've only spent a few years in when compared to people who were born and raised there. So basically, New Zealand is just becoming an expensive retirement home for wealthy Australians and Kiwis to enjoy the views while being served by a workforce just waiting for their turn to jump ship to Australia.
Interesting.
Okay, it's not quite that bad, but it's still
like
not
Disneyland.
great. And it begs the question, if New Zealand is losing so many people to this open relationship with Australia, why don't they just tighten down on the relationship? Well, that would be very difficult, just simply from a political perspective.
Yeah, I mean, they'd be kind of fucked.
10% of New Zealand's population currently lives in Australia, and as a general voting bloc, they aren't going to support a policy that makes their lives harder. Most people are generally very supportive of this flexibility as well, because it's good for them, even if it isn't necessarily good for the country itself. Geopolitically, it probably wouldn't be that easy either. I know I have said it a lot in this video already, but Australia and New Zealand genuinely may be the friendliest countries in the world. And then there is the economics. Obviously, losing so many young, productive workers hurts, but a lot of those workers don't leave forever. A lot of them return later in their careers with skills collected from Australia, and they often bring back a lot of cash with them too, which can then get pumped back into the local economy. The actual solutions are going to be more considered.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that you should just clamp down and like lock people into New Zealand so they can't leave for better opportunity is crazy. You got to find an industry that can work and grow in New Zealand and make some jobs there. That's it. It is great. I mean, it's such a beautiful country. I'm shocked. I thought it would be more about housing costs and not just that they couldn't, in a digital economy, you'd think you could bring something up.
Steps just to make New Zealand rewarding.
Chocolate milk. I do know that New Zealand has like world-class chalky milk. They went like insanely viral. Is it Lewis Road or something? Lewis Road Creamery, and everyone was fucking waiting in line. And they were selling bottles for like $60
to young workers. Now, of course, providing good jobs and reducing relative housing costs is easier said than done, but they do have some advantages. A relatively low debt to GDP ratio means that the government does have some wiggle room to enact big change if it ever feels it's necessary, and beyond all of that, it's a lovely place to live. The reason they can sell golden visas to billionaires and multi-million-dollar lake houses to Australian retirees is because it's a safe, stable, clean, and very picturesque country. That may sound wishy-washy in the field of economics, but it genuinely matters. And while they have that, they will always have a long line of people at their doorstep. In fact, even here in Australia, the country causing all of these problems for our poor little cousin across the sea, we are more reliant on these intangible...
Dude, I figured it out. I actually figured it out. I can save New Zealand right now. Here's what it is. They build one of the sickest, best-looking, ultimate bunkers of all time, okay? A true nuclear apocalypse paradise. It's got everything in it, top of the line, okay? They film a tour with their president of the bunker, and they show this is an incredible top of the line. It's got water, food, a movie theater. It's got everything you fucking would need. Okay, then, Prime Minister, then they go around the world and they sell that bunker, the same bunker, 100+ times to different billionaires. Okay, they print up different copies of the key and they sell it. They show them the walk through the tour and they're like, all right, we have a special bunker. We're going to sell it for, $500 million. And they sell it to all these people for the apocalypse. And they just kind of bank on the fact the apocalypse won't come. If anyone wants to come and tour it, they carefully schedule it out so nobody else is touring it at the same time. So every time you tour it, you're like, wow, this is mine. But secretly and so you've just sold one bunker for billions and billions of dollars. And if the world does end, fucking default, who cares? First come, first serve.
Factors than we would probably like to admit. But we've made an entire video on that last year, which you should be able to click to on your...
Apocalypse happens and it's not your slot with a timeshare. Dude, a timeshare bunker for the apocalypse is so funny. You gotta really hope the nukes drop in your week.